Hi, this is Greg from the Proficient Microsoft BI team. Welcome to the second video in our series Power BI Basics Inside Office 365. This video is going to focus on site admin and security basics. If you saw the first video, we identified three different functional areas inside Power BI, inside of SharePoint Online. There's the Power BI, there's Sites, and there's the Power BI admin section. This video is only going to address securing a SharePoint site and the Power BI site. If you are intimately familiar with securing a SharePoint site, you're probably not going to be interested in what else is in this video. You might want to skip ahead to the third video in the series. We're just going to go into how groups work, how you secure a site, how you secure your content. And as stated earlier, it's identical to any other SharePoint site. The SharePoint security framework is built around the ideas of sites and content and groups and users. Sites are URLs that you will browse to in a web browser. Content is any document basically that you have uploaded to that site that you want other people to have access to. Users, as you know, are individuals that generally have a corporate login. Groups are simply just collections of those users. A lot of people get confused on what is the difference between a SharePoint group and an Active Directory group. Well, an Active Directory group by definition only contains people that are on your domain. There's a big contrast in a SharePoint group, which can contain an Active Directory or corporate account, but it's also extensible to anyone who simply has an Outlook.com email address or a Hotmail address or an Office Live address. So there's a little bit of a change in the model there with the SharePoint group, because it can not only include your corporate users, but you can give access to your sites and content to anybody with a valid Microsoft account. SharePoint groups also work as roles in a traditional sense. So not only does a group define a set of users, it also typically defines their abilities inside of a site. An example of that would be a group that is sales management. They might have full control over a site. Sales reps or field reps may only have view or edit permissions. Security is usually administrated at the site or the document library level. You can administer it on top of, say, a specific content that was uploaded. Say you have an Excel services report and you want to restrict access to everybody except maybe one or two users. You can do that. However, that's generally considered bad practice, and it can lead to an overload in administration. Let's take a look at how we do some of these things. Okay, we're going to go through some of the steps that you would use to secure a site. SharePoint is a collection of sites. Sites are URLs that you can browse to. One SharePoint instance can have many different sites. Sites are sort of the top of the pyramid in its model. Below the top would be things like pages, lists, and document libraries. Out of the box, when we create a new site, we're going to get 4 default SharePoint groups that we can start putting users into. And depending on which group they're put into, they would receive the appropriate permission level to work inside that site. So if I drill down one level, I'm now taken to a SharePoint page that's showing me a document library that I have uploaded some content to. Content would be the most granular or at the bottom of the pyramid. With content being the most granular or the smallest unit that you'll be able to apply permissions to, you'll remember earlier that we said that's generally not a best practice. Nobody wants to go through a document library and assign individual permissions to every Excel service document inside that library. It can just become an administrative nightmare. So instead, what you'll usually do is assign permissions to a page or to that document library. As an example, and just as a use case here, I want to take my personal account and give it edit permissions inside this page and document library. Currently, I'm logged in with an administrator account. My personal account doesn't have access to this site or to this page. Let's show you how you do that. Up top, you'll see page. Simply select that item, and this ribbon bar comes up, and towards the middle left, you'll see page permissions. When you click page permissions, it brings you to this view here, and you'll see those 4 default groups that are coming from the parent. And what you want to do is tell it to stop inheriting those permissions. So when you click stop inheriting permissions, the screen will change and you'll get grant permissions. So let's add my user account to the members group, and then you'll see new, add users to this group. I found my personal account and I'm going to click share. And now when I log in, I'll be able to edit content and view content inside this document library. Okay, so we just saw how to take an individual user and simply add them to a SharePoint group to allow them to have edit and view permissions for all the content in that library and on that page. In this next section, I just want to go over a few what I consider to be best practices and things that may help you out when setting up your SharePoint groups and your Active Directory groups. I know with anything architectural it can be opinionated and there can be different ways that different people like to do things. However, there's usually very few ways to do things right, and there's a lot of ways to screw them up. So if everything I say in the next slide isn't exactly how you do it, that's okay. Chances are, if you're doing it well and doing it right and it's working for you, it's probably something similar. So with that in mind, let's just go over what I consider to be some good naming conventions and good standards, things you want to do to make administrating permissions inside your SharePoint site a little bit easier. Given the chance to have some control over the naming conventions and how the groups inside SharePoint and Active Directory are set up, I like to use this exact naming pattern you see up top. I go application underscore site name underscore functional area underscore the type of permission that this group is going to have. So for example, if I had a Power BI site with a document library named sales, in Active Directory I'm going to create a group for each level of access that I need to administrate on that sales document library. So I would have SP underscore Power BI, which is the site name, underscore sales, the functional group, underscore members. And then I would do the same thing for full control, and then I'd do the same thing if I needed a read-only group. Structuring like that is a little bit more work initially, but in the long run it's just good housekeeping and good practice. Now, like I said before, your naming pattern might not be exactly this. It might not be what you use in your institution. However, if it's well done, it probably doesn't look much different. I've seen examples where maybe instead of site name or functional area, they'll use a geographic region or the name of the building, etc. The point is, use a good pattern. Also, put the type of access that they will have at the end and do several groups. That's the part that might be a little bit different. Ultimately, though, it does make it easier, and just use something that makes sense to you. For my last slide in this video, I thought it would be helpful to do a small visualization about the ideas we were just talking about. Down below here we have a Power BI site. This would be the URL that leads to the root level of our Power BI and Office 365. And inside of our site, we have two document libraries represented by these two boxes: sales reports and accounting reports. Clearly, those are going to require different users and different permissions. You don't want the accountants reading all the sales reports. You don't want the sales people reading all the accounting reports. So we've set up 5 different SharePoint groups. We've set up SharePoint group accounting members with edit, SharePoint group accounting owners, full control, and the same on the sales side, members and owners. We've also set up kind of a non-standard group called external auditors read-only on the accounting reports. Okay, so if we go back inside the domain, Active Directory users and groups, I've taken some of the accounting personnel and I've added them to an Active Directory group called SP_BI_accounting members. And obviously those are going to go in this group here, and they're going to have edit permissions on the accounting reports. And I've done the same with the sales. I've broken them out into members and owners. Your owners are going to be your managers or your executive, and this is going to be your field sales. So the owners are going to be either your power users or whomever needs to upload content, edit content, delete content. And then you have your members who can take one of your reports, save it with their own name, maybe share it to someone else. Pretty standard stuff here. You've got Active Directory groups, and then you've got an equivalent SharePoint group that they go into. The new idea that we discussed earlier is, how about an external auditor? They're not going to have a domain account. However, you need them to look at some of your accounting reports. This might be one of those examples where instead of giving them access to the whole document library, you only do give them read-only permissions to, let's say, maybe 4 or 5 things inside your document library. These people aren't a part of any group besides the SharePoint group, external auditors. Since they're not on your domain, they don't need an account here and don't have an account here. All they need is their Outlook.com address, and then you directly put that address or that user account into external auditors. You would simply put their email address, and they're going to be able to browse to your SharePoint site. That's a big difference from the traditional on-premise SharePoint, where normally you don't get into that situation. Generally speaking, what you would do is you would have a SharePoint site that faces externally, and you would have one that's internal. In this scenario, it's one SharePoint site, but we're able to administrate from inside and outside the domain. That concludes the second video in our Office 365 Power BI series. Stay tuned for the next 2. My associate Stephen is going to go over content types such as Power Pivot, Power View, and how you upload and manage those in a Power BI site. He's also going to show you how to connect an Office 365 site to on-premise data via the Data Gateway. If you have any questions, you can email myself or anyone on the Proficient Microsoft BI team. Thanks for watching today, and take care.